The black belt was known in his town as a man of great skill and power. He had trained for many years, he had broken boards with his fists, he had won trophies in tournaments, and he had earned the respect of almost everyone who stepped into the gym. When he walked on the mat, the students grew silent, they bowed their heads, and they watched every move he made as if it was something sacred. He liked this feeling, he liked being the center of attention, he liked that people admired him, he liked that his word inside the gym was final and no one dared to challenge it. He was a teacher, but more than that, he was a figure of authority. Parents would bring their children to him and trust that he would shape them into strong, disciplined young men and women. He would stand in front of the class with his black belt tied tightly, his GI neat and spotless, his voice loud and sharp. He would shout commands and the students would obey without question. When he said jump, they jumped. When he said strike, they struck. And when he said stop, they froze. This was his kingdom, and he was the ruler of it. But power can be dangerous when it is not balanced with humility. Over time he began to feel not only respected but untouchable. He believed no one in the room could ever equal him. He believed his belt gave him a right to speak however he wanted, to act however he wanted, and sometimes he let arrogance slip through his smile. He would laugh at beginners when they stumbled. He would joke about students who made mistakes, and though people laughed with him, some could feel that his laughter was not kind. It was the laughter of someone who thought himself higher than others. He had forgotten that once he too was a beginner. Once he too had made mistakes. Once he too had been nervous stepping on the mat for the first time. Instead he carried himself like a man who had always been strong, who had always been fast, who had always been powerful, and so he stood taller, walked prouder, and let his ego feed on the admiration around him. He did not notice that in small ways he was beginning to lose the true spirit of martial arts, the spirit of respect and humility. Outside the gym he lived a comfortable life. People in the neighborhood recognized him. Some would greet him with respect. Others whispered about his strict nature. Children in school bragged that they trained under him. He had built a reputation that stretched beyond the walls of his training hall. Yet in the quiet moments when no one was watching, a flicker of insecurity sometimes crossed his mind. He would push it away quickly, because to him weakness was something he could never show. Not even to himself. He had worked too hard to earn his black belt. Too hard to let anyone believe he was anything less than a master. Every evening when training began, he walked into the gym as though it was a stage. The mats smelled of sweat and effort. The mirrors reflected his every move, and the sound of kicks hitting pads echoed like drums. His students lined up in rows, their white uniforms glowing under the lights, and he, with his black belt, stood at the front like a general before his soldiers. He gave speeches about discipline, about focus, about strength, and many of his words were true. But sometimes his pride slipped in between the sentences, like when he told them that only the strongest deserved respect, or when he mocked someone too weak to finish a push-up. To the young ones, he seemed unshakable. They admired his power, they copied his attitude, they wanted to be like him. But to the older ones, to the parents and the staff who watched quietly, they could see how his pride sometimes made him careless. They could see how his jokes cut deeper than he realized, and they wondered if one day his arrogance might cost him. The maid who cleaned the gym saw this more clearly than anyone. She swept the floor quietly in the evenings, listening to his voice ring out, watching him laugh with the stronger students, and watching him overlook the weaker ones. She respected his skill, but she also noticed his pride. She noticed how he enjoyed the attention too much, how he sometimes looked at people not as equals but as entertainment. She never said a word, because she was just the cleaner, just the one who picked up the pieces after everyone went home. But in her heart she thought, pride always has a price. The black belt, however, could not see the storm quietly building. To him life was stable. The gym was his world, and his belt was proof that he was above others. He thought respect came from fear and admiration mixed together. He thought jokes at someone else's expense were harmless. He thought his position was unshakable. So he carried on each day with the same proud steps, the same sharp voice, the same laughter, believing nothing could disturb the order of his world. What he did not know was that a quiet pair of eyes, belonging to the maid's daughter, had been watching him every evening from the corner of the gym. He did not know that while he was showing off to his students, she was memorizing movements. He did not know that while he laughed, she was absorbing lessons in silence. And he certainly did not know that one day his own pride would push him to invite her onto the mat, and that decision would change the way the entire gym saw him forever. That was the man the black belt had become, proud, respected, admired, but blind to the danger of his own arrogance, blind to the fact that strength without humility can turn respect into fear, blind to the truth that sometimes the greatest lessons come from those we least expect. And while he laughed and led his students like a king, fate was preparing to test him in a way he could never imagine. Not with a seasoned fighter, not with a rival, but with the quiet daughter of the maid who cleaned his floor each night. The maid was a woman who carried herself with quiet dignity. She worked long hours cleaning the gym, wiping sweat from the mats, dusting the mirrors, and mopping the floor until it shone. She never complained, not even when her hands were red from scrubbing or when her back ached from bending over all day. Most people barely noticed her. They stepped around her with their shoes on. They passed her by without greeting. She blended into the background like part of the walls. She was not rich, she was not powerful, but she had a strength that came from patience, from love, and from the will to survive for her child. Her daughter often came along after school, a thin girl with sharp eyes and a quiet nature. She did not talk much. She sat in the corner with her books or simply watched the training sessions. To many she was invisible, just the maid's child. But inside her was a burning curiosity. She did not see the gym as a place of strangers. She saw it as a secret classroom. Each strike, each kick, each command shouted by the black belt was like a lesson whispered only to her. While the others trained loudly, she trained silently in her mind. She had no uniform, no belt, no gloves, no shoes fit for training. She wore her school clothes, sometimes a little torn, sometimes too big, sometimes patched by her mother's needle. She did not complain. She did not envy the rich children in their crisp uniforms. Instead, she studied them. She watched their feet when they moved. She counted the rhythm of their punches. She copied their stances in her imagination. At home, she practiced in the small room she shared with her mother, punching the air, kicking an old pillow, repeating what she had seen until her body remembered. Her mother often worried when she saw her daughter shadowboxing in the tiny space. She would say, "Child, you must focus on your studies. Fighting is not for us. Fighting is for those who can afford teachers." But the girl only smiled. Her hands curled into fists. She felt alive every time she mimicked the fighters. It was as though a fire inside her had been lit. A fire she could not put out even if she wanted to. In the gym, the girl was quiet, but her eyes missed nothing. When the black belt demonstrated a technique, she leaned forward ever so slightly, memorizing the way he turned his wrist, the way his feet pivoted, the way his shoulders rolled into a punch. When the students sparred, she studied the timing, the distance, the mistakes they made, and the corrections they received. To others, it was just a training session. To her, it was a performance she was recording in her mind. Sometimes the other kids noticed her. They whispered and giggled. They called her names. They asked why she came at all. She was not one of them. She had no belt, no skill, no place on the mat, but she did not answer back. She just kept watching. Her silence was her shield, and inside she promised herself that one day they would see she was more than the maid's daughter, more than the shadow sitting in the corner. Her mother, though proud of her daughter's sharpness, always feared humiliation. She had worked hard to keep a respectful distance from the fighters. She never wanted her daughter to feel mocked or looked down upon. So she told her, "Stay quiet, stay still, stay away from trouble." But destiny has a strange way of ignoring such wishes, because the girl's talent could not stay hidden forever. There were nights when they returned home late, tired from work and watching training. Their home was small with little furniture. But in that small space the girl found her freedom. She would practice until sweat ran down her face, her mother watching with worry yet with secret admiration, because though she feared for her, she could not deny the grace, the precision, the natural power her daughter showed. It was as if the martial art was inside her blood, waiting for a chance to come alive. The maid sometimes wondered if life was playing a trick on her. She, a woman who scrubbed floors, giving birth to a girl whose fists carried lightning. It did not make sense. But then again, life rarely made sense. She prayed her daughter's passion would not one day clash with the pride of those who ruled the gym, because she knew pride and hidden strength, when they meet, can create storms. The daughter never said it aloud, but she dreamed of stepping on the mat, of tying a belt around her waist, of standing shoulder to shoulder with the others, not as the maid's child, but as a fighter. She dreamed of proving that skill and spirit did not belong only to those who could pay fees, but to anyone who had the courage to train. Even if training meant copying in silence, even if training meant sweating alone in a small room, She dreamed quietly, holding her fists tight at her sides, waiting for the day she could release what she carried inside. And so she watched, night after night, week after week. Her eyes sharper than any student's, her memory stronger than any notebook, her spirit growing in silence, until one day, when the black belt's arrogance pushed him to make a joke, that quiet, invisible girl would be given a chance to show the strength no one believed she had. The strength her mother feared but secretly respected, the strength that would stun the entire gym with just a single strike. It was a warm afternoon, the kind of day when the gym smelled even stronger of sweat and effort. The students had just finished a hard training session. Their uniforms stuck to their bodies, their faces red and shining. The black belt stood proudly in the middle of the mat, his chest out, his smile wide. He loved these moments when everyone looked at him, when his voice was the loudest in the room, when his power felt unquestionable. He cracked jokes to lighten the mood. The students laughed, not because the jokes were truly funny, but because they wanted to please him, they wanted to be on his good side. Nobody dared to be silent when the black belt laughed. In one corner of the gym, the maid was sweeping the floor. Her daughter sat quietly with her school bag beside her. Just like every other day, she was watching, always watching, her sharp eyes following every move. She was small, dressed in plain clothes, almost invisible to most people in the room. But to the black belt she became a sudden target of amusement. Maybe he was bored, maybe he wanted to show off, maybe he thought it was harmless fun. But his eyes landed on her and he decided to make her the subject of his next joke. "Why don't we let the maid's daughter fight today?" he said loudly, his voice carrying across the gym. Some students laughed immediately. Others looked at the girl with curious eyes. The maid froze. Her hands tightened on the broom. She did not like the sound of those words. She knew her daughter's quiet passion. But she also knew the cruel laughter of crowds. She feared her daughter would be humiliated in front of everyone. She wanted to protest, but her voice got stuck in her throat. The daughter looked at him, her heart pounding fast. She had not expected this. She had been content to watch from the shadows, to learn in silence, and now suddenly all eyes were on her, students whispering, some giggling, some even daring to point. The black belt smiled as if he had told the funniest joke. "Come on," he teased. "Show us your hidden skills. Maybe you're stronger than you look." His voice dripped with mockery. It was not an invitation of respect. It was a challenge meant to make people laugh. The students began to chant softly, some calling her name, others clapping. They wanted a spectacle. Children are quick to follow the lead of power. And since the black belt wanted this, they wanted it too. The maid's daughter felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to say no, to hide behind her mother, but another feeling rose inside her chest, a mixture of anger and courage. Anger that they saw her as nothing more than a joke, and courage that maybe, just maybe, this was the moment she had been waiting for. She stood up slowly, her legs trembling slightly but her back straight. The room grew louder with surprise. No one thought she would actually accept. Her mother gasped, whispering her name, begging her to sit back down. But the girl shook her head gently, her eyes fixed on the mat. She stepped forward barefoot, leaving her shoes and bag in the corner. Each step echoing louder in her own ears than the noise of the students. The black belt raised his eyebrows, amused. Well, he said. "Looks like she has some spirit after all." The students parted to make space, forming a circle around the mat, their faces glowing with excitement. Some already pulled out their phones to record. They thought this would be funny. A little girl fumbling around while the black belt toyed with her. Nobody believed they were about to witness something very different. Nobody except perhaps the mother, who held her breath as if sensing that the air itself was about to change. The black belt squared his shoulders, pretending to take the fight seriously. But his grin gave away his real intentions. He was not planning to hurt her, only to play, to show her weakness, to give the students a laugh. He stood tall, arms loose at his sides, waiting for her to make a clumsy move. In his mind he already pictured the students laughing when she stumbled. He pictured himself bowing and joking afterward, the proud teacher entertaining his class. But what he did not picture was that his arrogance had opened the door for something he could not control. The maid's daughter faced him with steady eyes, her heart still racing but her mind strangely clear. She remembered every move she had studied from the sidelines, every stance, every strike, every correction the black belt had ever given his students. She planted her feet just like she had seen them do. She lifted her hands just like a fighter would. The black belt chuckled. The students laughed again. But inside her chest the fire grew hotter, the fire she had carried in silence for years. And now it had found the perfect moment to burn. The mother watched helplessly, torn between fear and pride. She wanted to pull her daughter back, to shield her from humiliation. But something in her daughter's eyes kept her frozen. It was not the eyes of a frightened child. It was the eyes of someone who knew exactly what she wanted to do. The mother's heart ached, because she realized this was no longer just about a joke. This was about dignity, about respect, about proving that strength can live in the most unexpected places. The students clapped, cheered, whispered, some mocking, some curious. The black belt stretched his arms, bowing slightly in mock ceremony, and the girl, without saying a word, bowed too. Not out of mockery but out of the deepest respect she had learned by watching. That small bow silenced a few voices. It was a sign that she was not stepping into the circle as a joke. She was stepping in as a fighter, even if no one believed it yet. The stage was set, the crowd restless, the black belt smiling with confidence, and the maid's daughter standing small but unshaken in front of him. It was still a game in everyone's eyes, a light-hearted trick to fill the afternoon with laughter. But in her heart it was something far more serious. It was a chance to show the truth she had carried for years, a chance to strike not only with her fist but with the strength of every silent moment she had endured. The moment had arrived, and nobody, not even the proud black belt, was ready for what was about to happen next. The girl stood barefoot on the mat, her toes pressing into the surface, her heart beating like a drum inside her chest. The sound of whispers and giggles from the students filled the gym. Some were already pointing phones at her, ready to capture a moment they thought would be funny. The black belt stood opposite her, tall and confident, a grin stretched across his face. To him this was nothing more than a playful game, a way to show his control, a way to make his students laugh. But to the maid's daughter it was more than that. It was a test, a chance, maybe even the moment she had unknowingly prepared for in all those quiet nights at home. Her mother stood near the wall, her hands trembling as she clutched the broom tightly. She wanted to stop this. Her instincts screamed to pull her daughter back into the corner where she belonged. But she could not move. Her legs felt heavy. Her voice refused to come out. All she could do was watch, her eyes wide with both fear and curiosity. She had seen her daughter practice in secret. She had seen her daughter copy moves when no one was looking, but this was different. This was real, and the thought of her child standing against a black belt filled her heart with both dread and wonder. The black belt raised his hands lazily, as if mocking the seriousness of a real fight. "Ready?" he said, his voice loud and playful. The students clapped and laughed. Some shouted encouragement. Others whispered insults. Everyone was expecting the same outcome, that the girl would swing wildly, stumble, and give them all a good laugh. But the girl's eyes told a different story. She did not laugh. She did not smile. She simply nodded, her body calm, her gaze steady, her breathing slow but strong. The circle of students tightened. Everyone wanted a closer look. Their eyes shone with excitement. The sound of shuffling feet and hushed voices filled the air. The girl could hear her heartbeat in her ears. But she remembered the countless hours she had spent copying the fighters. She remembered how to stand, how to balance, how to move her feet. So she planted herself carefully, her knees slightly bent, her fists raised in a stance that surprised even a few of the older students. Some of them stopped laughing for a moment, wondering how she even knew to stand like that. The black belt chuckled and shook his head. "Not bad," he teased. "But let's see if you can keep it up." He moved closer, his steps confident, his body relaxed. He wasn't planning to hit her hard, only to tap her, to show her weakness, to make everyone laugh again. But the girl did not back away. She stood firm, her eyes following his every move like a hawk. She was nervous, but she had trained her mind for this without even realizing it. Every night she had studied. Every day she had memorized. Now her body was ready to respond. The students started to chant softly, the noise echoing in the gym, their excitement building. They thought they were about to witness a joke. The mother's heart raced as she whispered prayers under her breath. The black belt moved closer and lifted his hand, pretending to strike gently. But the girl suddenly shifted her weight, her eyes sharp, her body reacting with the kind of instinct that comes from endless practice and silence. She was no longer the maid's daughter sitting quietly in the corner. She was a fighter standing on the mat, facing someone the entire gym thought unbeatable. The tension in the air grew heavier, even though the black belt still smiled. Inside he was slightly surprised. The way she stood, the way she held her hands, it didn't look random. It looked like she had been trained. Though he brushed the thought aside quickly, believing it impossible, believing that no maid's daughter could carry real strength. He prepared to show her her place, ready to play the role of the teacher giving a playful lesson, yet his pride blinded him to the seriousness glowing in her eyes. The girl breathed deeply, her fists tight, her mother's voice faint in her ears, the whispers of the students surrounding her, the smirk on the black belt's face. All of it faded for a brief second. In her mind it was quiet, only the memory of movements she had studied for years remained. Her shoulders loosened, her stance sharpened, and she was ready, though no one in that room believed she could be. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath, their phones raised higher, waiting for the black belt to humiliate her with ease. The maid's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Her daughter's small figure seemed almost fragile on the mat. But there was something different about the way she stood, something invisible yet undeniable, something even the black belt could not quite name. As he squared up in front of her, still grinning, still proud, still blind to what was about to come. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected. The laughter quieted. The whispers softened, everyone's focus locked on the girl and the man who towered over her. The air thick with suspense. The black belt tapped his foot and motioned with his hand as if to say, "Come on then, show me." The girl's eyes narrowed slightly, her body tensed, and though no one in the crowd realized it yet, the entire energy of the gym was about to change in a single heartbeat. The black belt, standing relaxed and smug, thought he was about to teach a funny little lesson. The students thought they were about to witness a silly mistake. The maid thought she was about to see her daughter embarrassed, but the maid's daughter herself knew something no one else in that room knew. She knew she was ready. She knew this was her moment, and as she squared herself to face the black belt fully, the whole gym leaned in, unknowingly waiting for the strike that would soon leave them stunned into silence. The gym was filled with restless energy. The circle of students pressed in closer, some whispering jokes, others raising their phones higher to record what they thought would be an easy show. The black belt stood tall, his grin never fading, his eyes half playful and half mocking. He raised his hands as if this was just a harmless spar. His body relaxed. He wasn't worried at all. Why should he be? He was the master, the one everyone respected, the one with years of training, and in front of him was only the maid's daughter, small, nervous, a girl with no training. At least that was what everyone believed. The girl felt the weight of every eye in the room pressing against her. Her heart hammered like a drum, but instead of breaking her, the pressure focused her. She remembered all the nights she had stood alone in her small room, copying the moves she had watched again and again. She remembered punching the air until her arms ached, kicking pillows until her legs burned. She remembered the sound of her own breathing as she practiced in silence. In that moment, all of those memories filled her body with calm strength. Her hands tightened, her knees bent, her eyes locked on the black belt with a determination no one had seen before. The black belt stepped forward casually, his feet light on the mat. He lifted his hand as if to tap her shoulder or push her back, his smile daring her to swing. His students chuckled, some whispered, "She's going to fall right away." The mother's chest tightened, her lips moved in prayer, her hands clutching the broom so hard her knuckles turned white. She wanted to look away but she couldn't. Her daughter was standing there with a fire in her eyes, and something inside the mother told her this was going to be different. The girl breathed in, slow and deep. She watched the black belt's every move, the way his shoulders shifted, the way his feet landed. She had seen him do this countless times. She knew the rhythm. She knew the space. She had memorized him better than his own students. The black belt moved again, confident, ready to play, but in that exact moment, she exploded with speed, her fist shooting forward before anyone could blink, her knuckles connecting solidly against his body. The sound of the strike echoed like a clap of thunder in the gym, sharp and shocking. The black belt's body jolted. His eyes went wide for a split second. The grin wiped clean off his face. He staggered half a step back, not from pain that broke bones, but from the sheer shock of it. He had expected nothing, a weak swing at best. But what he received was a strike full of force, precision, and intent. It was real, it was powerful, it was undeniable. Gasps filled the gym instantly. The laughter that had filled the air vanished in a heartbeat. Students looked at one another, their mouths open. Some lowered their phones in disbelief, others froze mid-recording. The sound of the strike seemed to hang in the air longer than it should have, as if the whole room had been slapped awake. The maid's eyes widened, tears rolling down her cheeks. She had always known her daughter was sharp, but she had not known the depth of her hidden strength. And now, in front of everyone, that secret had burst into the open. The black belt steadied himself quickly, his pride refusing to let him show weakness, but inside his chest a storm was brewing. His mind was racing. How did she hit me like that? How did she even know how to throw a punch properly? How could this little girl, this maid's daughter, catch me off guard? His ego burned hotter than the sting of the strike. He wanted to brush it off, to laugh, to pretend it was nothing, but the silence in the gym made it impossible. Everyone had seen, everyone had heard, everyone had felt the shock of that moment. The girl stood still, her fist slowly lowering, her chest rising and falling as she breathed hard. She did not smile. She did not laugh. She did not celebrate. She simply stared at him, steady and unshaken. It was as though she had waited her whole life for this single moment, a moment to show not only him, but everyone, that she was not a joke, not a shadow in the corner, not just the maid's daughter. She was more than that, and with one strike she had made the entire gym believe it too. The students began to murmur, their voices low but full of astonishment. Did you see that? She actually hit him? That sounded real. Their disbelief spread like fire. The ones who had laughed at her before now looked at her with new eyes, some with respect, some with fear, some simply unable to understand what they had witnessed. The black belt clenched his jaw, trying to regain his composure, trying to stand taller, but the truth was already in the air. No matter what he did next, nothing could erase the sound of that strike or the shock it had left on everyone. The maid pressed her hands against her mouth, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. She felt pride. She felt fear. She felt relief. It was a storm of emotions crashing inside her. But above all, she knew one thing. Her daughter had changed the room forever with that single punch. The balance of respect had shifted. The invisible line that separated them from the rest of the world had been crossed, and there was no turning back. The girl's strike was not just a punch. It was a message. It carried years of silence, years of being overlooked, years of being invisible. It carried the spirit of someone who had learned not from lessons given but from lessons stolen with her eyes and her heart. And in that moment, she proved that true strength does not always wear a black belt. Sometimes it hides quietly, waiting, until the right moment comes to shock the world. And so the gym stood frozen, the black belt silent, the students stunned, the maid holding her breath, and the daughter standing tall, her body still trembling from the rush, but her spirit stronger than ever. One strike had changed everything. One strike had silenced laughter. One strike had rewritten how everyone saw her, and though no one knew it yet, that strike was only the beginning of a story they would never forget. The gym was frozen in silence. The sound of that punch still seemed to echo against the walls. The black belt stood stiff, his grin gone, his body tense. His pride stung more than his skin. No one had ever expected such a strike, especially not from the maid's daughter. And in that silence every student stared, eyes wide, mouths half open. The air was heavy with shock. Even the lights above seemed brighter, as if the whole world wanted to remember this moment. At first no one dared to speak. The laughter that had filled the room earlier had been cut away like a rope. It was as though the gym had lost its breath. Then whispers started, soft at first, then louder, students leaning into one another, some saying, "Did you see that?" Others murmuring, "That was real, that was strong." A few shook their heads in disbelief, trying to convince themselves it was just luck, but their voices carried doubt, because the sound of that strike had been too sharp, too clean. It had not been luck, it had been power. The black belt shifted on his feet, trying to straighten himself, trying to act as though nothing had happened, but he could feel the sting on his chest where her fist had landed. He clenched his jaw, his pride boiling inside him. He told himself it was nothing, it was just a lucky shot. But deep down he knew it had been more than that. He knew her stance, her focus, her speed had been real. He could not deny what the entire gym had seen. And for the first time in years, he felt small under the weight of so many eyes. The maid pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had feared humiliation, but now she feared something else. Her daughter had shown her strength in front of everyone, a strength that could not be hidden anymore. She felt pride bursting in her chest, but also a deep worry, because pride and power in the wrong place can bring both respect and trouble. She whispered her daughter's name softly, her heart torn between wanting to hold her close and wanting to let her shine. The students who had mocked her before now looked at her with new eyes, some filled with respect, some with jealousy, some with awe. A boy in the front row lowered his phone slowly, forgetting to keep recording, his hands shaking. He realized he had just captured something no one would believe without proof. Others kept their cameras up, whispering that this clip would go viral if they dared share it, but most of them were too stunned to even think clearly. The image of the black belt, staggering back, played over and over in their minds. The girl herself stood still, her breathing fast, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes calm. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply stared at the black belt, waiting steady, her mind replaying the strike she had just delivered. She could still feel the power in her knuckles, the way it had landed, the way the sound had cracked the room open. She had dreamed of this, but even in her dreams it had never felt this real, this powerful, this unforgettable. She had proven herself, in a way no words could ever do. The gym began to buzz louder, like a hive of bees, the shock turning into a storm of voices. She hit him? The maid's daughter? She actually landed it. The black belt's face tightened. He wanted to quiet them, to laugh it off, to take back the power that had slipped from his hands. But his pride was bleeding, and he knew no laugh could erase what had just happened. The respect in the room had shifted, the invisible balance had been broken. And though he was still the black belt, still the master, for the first time the students were looking at someone else with the same kind of awe. The maid's daughter became the center of every eye, her small frame, her plain clothes, her quiet face. She stood there like a flame in the middle of the circle. She did not ask for this moment, but it had come, and now no one could deny it. She had done what no one expected. She had struck the strongest man in the room and left the gym stunned. And though she remained quiet, her silence now carried more weight than all the black belt's words. The mother wiped her tears, her heart thundering. She remembered all the nights she had told her daughter to study instead of practice. All the time she had tried to stop her from dreaming too big. And now she realized her daughter had been right all along. The fire inside her had not been foolish. It had been real. It had been waiting for this chance. She wanted to run to her, to hug her, to tell her how proud she was, but she knew the girl did not need it now. She stood proudly on her own, stronger than anyone had ever given her credit for. Some students began clapping softly, hesitant at first, unsure if they should. But soon others joined, the sound filling the silence, not loud, not like a cheer, but like an admission, an acknowledgement of what they had just seen. The black belt's jaw clenched tighter. His pride bruised by the applause not for him, but for her. He forced a smile, though it looked strained, and he bowed slightly to hide his embarrassment. But the truth was carved into the faces around him. Respect had shifted, even if only for a moment, and that was enough to change everything. The girl looked around slowly, her eyes meeting those of the students who had once mocked her. She saw their fear, their surprise, their respect, and she felt something inside her chest grow stronger. She did not need to say a word. The strike had spoken for her, louder than any voice could. She was no longer invisible, no longer just the maid's daughter. She was someone who could not be ignored, and the whole gym knew it now. And so the gym remained in shock, the black belt silent, the mother in tears, the students whispering, the daughter standing tall. The world had turned upside down in a single heartbeat, and no matter what happened next, the story of that strike would stay in their minds forever. The day the maid's daughter silenced an entire gym with one punch, the day respect was rewritten with the sound of a fist. The gym was still buzzing, whispers running like waves across the circle of students. The black belt tried to stand tall, tried to hide his shock, but the look in his eyes betrayed him. He had felt the weight of that strike, and he knew it had not been luck. The maid's daughter stood calmly, her small fist still trembling but her gaze steady. Everyone wanted to know how could she, a girl who had never trained, deliver a punch like that? The question hung heavy in the air, and slowly, the truth began to unfold. The mother lowered the broom in her hands, her body weak with emotion. She had kept a secret for years, though not by intention. Her daughter had built her own world, a world of practice hidden in the shadows. The maid had seen glimpses of it. She had watched her daughter kick pillows late at night, punch the air until sweat rolled down her forehead, copy stances in front of the cracked mirror. The mother had always thought it was childish play, but deep inside she knew her daughter's seriousness. She knew that every movement was being sharpened in silence. The girl had been her own teacher, her own student, her own judge. While others paid money for lessons and uniforms, she had used her eyes and her memory. She had studied the black belt every day, memorizing his stance, the way his feet turned, the way his fists curled. She had learned from the mistakes of his students. She had seen when they were corrected. She had noted every detail, and then she had gone home and repeated them in secret, over and over until her body moved with natural precision. She had built her skill not in the gym, but in the quiet of her small home. Her room was tiny, the floor uneven, but in that space she had created a training hall of her own. The pillow became her target. The air became her opponent. The shadow on the wall became her sparring partner, night after night, after finishing homework, after helping her mother. She would practice until her arms were sore, her legs heavy, but she never stopped. Her spirit refused to be silent. Her love for martial arts burned brighter each day. Even if no one else believed she belonged on the mat. The students stared at her now, trying to understand. They remembered the way she always sat in the corner, quiet, unnoticed, but watching, always watching. They realized she had not been wasting time. She had been studying them, studying their master, and now the proof stood before them. Her single strike had carried not only power but knowledge. The kind of knowledge that only comes from patience, dedication, and relentless practice. She had done what none of them had thought possible. She had trained herself in silence until her body spoke louder than words. The black belt's pride twisted inside him. He could not accept it. Yet he could not deny it. He had underestimated her. He had turned her into a joke, and she had turned his arrogance into her chance. He thought of all the years he had trained, all the hours spent perfecting his craft, and now here stood a girl, the daughter of a maid, who had copied his moves without a single lesson and delivered a strike strong enough to shake his confidence. His ego burned, but somewhere deep inside, respect flickered, though he tried to smother it quickly. The maid's daughter stood quietly. She did not boast. She did not laugh. She did not even smile, because she knew this was not the end. She knew one strike was only the beginning. But she also knew that the truth could no longer be hidden. She was not just a child sitting in the corner anymore. She was a fighter in her own right, forged not by teachers, not by belts, not by trophies, but by her own determination and fire, and now the world had seen it. Her mother's tears flowed freely. She remembered every time she had told her daughter to stop, every time she had said, "This is not for us. This is not our world." She realized now that her daughter had quietly built a bridge into that world with her own strength. She had refused to accept limits. She had refused to remain invisible. And with one punch she had crossed into a place no one thought she could reach. The mother's heart swelled with pride, mixed with fear, because she knew that strength could bring both honor and challenge. The students slowly began to nod among themselves, respect growing where mockery had been. One whispered, "She's been training all this time?" Another said, "She learned just by watching." Their voices carried amazement, even envy. Some of them had trained for years, yet this girl, without stepping onto the mat, had matched their skill in her own way. It was humbling, it was frightening, it was inspiring, and slowly their eyes shifted from the black belt to her, as though they were ready to listen to a new story, one that was only just beginning. The black belt finally spoke, his voice lower than usual, not filled with the same booming pride. He said, "You've been watching, haven't you?" It was not a question, it was an admission. His eyes studied her, searching for an answer. But the girl only bowed her head slightly, not as a joke, not as arrogance, but as respect. Respect for the art, respect for the moment, respect even for him, the man she had just struck. Her bow was simple, but it carried more weight than 1,000 words. The truth had been revealed. The maid's daughter was no accident. no lucky swing. She was the product of years of silent practice, years of unseen effort, years of passion that refused to die. The students realized it, the black belt realized it, the maid realized it, and slowly the entire gym understood. Greatness can come from anywhere, from anyone, even from the daughter of a maid who had sat in the corner for years, invisible until the day her fist spoke for her. And so the room remained heavy with shock and respect, the students whispering about what they had just learned, the mother holding back sobs of pride, the black belt wrestling with his pride and the truth, and the girl standing tall, quiet, steady. Her secret no longer hidden, her fire no longer invisible, her strength finally seen by all. The hidden truth had been revealed, and nothing in that gym would ever be the same again. The gym was still heavy with silence, the sound of that single punch refused to leave the air. The students stared at the girl as though she had turned into someone else entirely. The black belt stood tall, but inside he was shaken, his pride wounded, his mind racing. For years he had believed no one in this place could match his authority. No one could challenge his skill. Yet this girl, the maid's daughter who had never once stepped on the mat to train, had reminded him of something he had long forgotten. Respect is the heart of martial arts, and pride. Without respect is weakness. He looked at her, really looked at her, not as a joke, not as the maid's child, but as a fighter. Her stance, her eyes, her silence, everything about her carried discipline. Not the discipline given by a teacher, but the discipline built in secret, the kind that grows from hunger, from patience, from determination. He realized she had been his student without him knowing it. She had absorbed every move, every lesson, every mistake corrected, and she had turned it into strength, not with money, not with a uniform, but with sheer will. The students shifted uncomfortably, their whispers now mixed with awe and guilt. Some of them remembered how they had laughed at her in the past, how they had mocked her plain clothes, her quiet nature, how they had dismissed her as nobody. Now their laughter tasted bitter, because the girl they mocked had shown more heart, more fire, and more courage than many of them. Their eyes softened, respect blooming slowly like a flower that had been waiting for sunlight. They realized they had underestimated not only her but the meaning of strength itself. The maid wiped her tears, her chest full of emotions she could not name. She had worried about humiliation, but instead she had witnessed a moment of glory. She had tried to keep her daughter small, safe, hidden from the sharpness of the world, but her daughter had broken free, not with anger, not with rebellion, but with strength and courage. The maid understood now that protecting her daughter did not mean hiding her fire. It meant letting it burn where the world could see. Her pride was deep, mixed with relief, mixed with fear, but most of all with love. She had always believed her daughter was special. Now everyone else knew it too. The black belt drew a deep breath. He could not allow his arrogance to blind him any longer. He stepped forward, his eyes steady but softer than before. The students fell silent, waiting to see what he would say. The black belt bowed his head slightly toward the girl. Not mocking this time, not playful, but real. It was a gesture of respect, and the gym gasped softly, because no one had ever seen him bow like that to anyone outside his circle. He said in a firm but quiet voice, "You have strength and you have discipline. Today I was reminded that respect belongs to everyone who shows true spirit." His words carried weight, they carried humility, and the students listened. The girl lowered her head in a bow as well, her respect genuine, her silence saying more than words ever could. She was not proud in the way that shows off. She was proud in the way that glows quietly, the way that cannot be shaken. She had not come to embarrass him. She had not come to steal attention. She had only come because she was called, and when the moment arrived, she showed her truth, and that truth spoke louder than any insult, any laughter, or any belt ever could. The students clapped again, louder this time, not in mockery, but in real respect. Their applause filled the gym, echoing against the walls. The black belt accepted it with a stiff nod, but deep inside he knew the applause was not for him. It was for her, and strangely, instead of anger, he felt a kind of peace, because the lesson had returned to him, the lesson he had forgotten, that martial arts is not about pride, not about mocking, not about standing above others. It is about discipline, humility, and respect even for those you least expect. From that day forward, the girl was no longer invisible. She still sat in the corner sometimes, still quiet, still simple, But when people looked at her, they looked differently, they looked with respect. Some of the same students who had laughed at her before now asked her quietly about her practice, curious about how she had trained in silence. Some even admired her more than they admired the black belt, because her strength came not from being handed opportunities, but from creating them. With her own hands, her presence changed the air of the gym forever. Her mother too walked with new dignity. When she cleaned the mats, people greeted her now. Some bowed to her politely, as if they finally saw her as part of the place and not just the background. The strike of her daughter had not only earned respect for herself but had lifted her mother's dignity as well. What had once been invisible was now shining, and no one could deny it. The black belt also changed, little by little. He was still strict, still proud, but he carried a new humility. He no longer mocked the weak. He no longer laughed at mistakes, instead he taught with patience. He reminded his students that strength can appear in anyone, that arrogance blinds the eyes, that respect must be given before it is earned back. The lesson the maid's daughter had given him lived inside his heart, shaping him as much as any training ever had. The story spread beyond the walls of the gym, whispered from student to student, from parent to parent. It became a tale of respect, a tale of humility, a tale of how a girl who was seen as nothing proved herself with a single punch. People spoke of it in awe, some in disbelief, but all agreed on one thing. It was unforgettable, a moment that showed the true meaning of strength. And so the lesson was clear. Respect is not measured by belts or uniforms. It is not owned by the strong or denied to the weak. It belongs to those who carry discipline, courage, and humility. The maid's daughter had taught that lesson without speaking a word, and everyone who had been in that gym would remember it for the rest of their lives. The black belt, the students, the mother, all carried it with them, and the girl herself walked forward with quiet pride. Her fire burning brighter, no longer hidden, no longer silent, but alive for the world to see.